What's going on, guys? It's Frito here for your Overwatch. We just got a new blog post from Blizzard. This blog post explains different reworks they have iterated on for Moira, but also talks about their philosophy change for designing heroes in a new era. They say here, we have two goals for Moira's kit. We wanted to give her more utility and the power to make game-changing plays. And they say all the following iterations of Moira's abilities are still in the early stages of the iteration process, meaning they haven't been tested outside of the hero balance and design team. I would be shocked if there wasn't support hero reworks in the next upcoming beta. And these changes we'll go over will explain the types of things they're thinking about. Iteration number 1, Pain Converter. One of the first changes the team thought to make was referred to as Pain Converter. This ability was a damage reduction that, when cast on allies, would enable Moira to convert the damage she mitigates to fill up her healing bar. Pain Converter would cancel some of the damage an ally received, while simultaneously allowing her to heal allies with Biotic Grasp, massively increasing her target's survivability. This iteration didn't stick because of a few issues. Pain Converter felt like other existing abilities, like Batiste's Immortality Field, that prevented teammates from dying. The ability also felt too situational because you got the most value from using it on the tank and not on teammates getting dove or flanked. Lastly, Moira already has a complete kit, and we struggled to find room where we could add another ability, which, having heard the devs speak recently on an interview with SVB and ML7, this is something that I think we probably take for granted on how do they add an extra ability. Like, for example, with Zenyatta, they just made his kick also boop and do extra damage. That's kind of a simple one. Like, the key bind of it, or the button you press for it, is actually important to the design because that's how you're going to interact with the character. Mercy is another example where they highlighted in that interview that they're going to be testing some new changes to the super jump from Mercy in the upcoming beta 2. Now, back onto this Moira post, they said, we tried binding Pain Converter to the reload key, but this felt awkward since Moira wasn't reloading a weapon. There was a brief iteration where players could activate it by holding down primary and secondary fire simultaneously, but the key binding added a level of clunkiness to her kit. Moira frequently switches between primary and secondary fire, so the ability would often accidentally trigger. Okay, so that's the first one that they won't be using, mainly because it was kind of clunky, hard to bind, and not unique enough, and maybe a bit too simple to use. But I will say, I find this interesting because it is similar to things I've said about the support role on the channel so far, that they are likely to be the ones that you'll find that have the most broken, let's say, abilities that sort of exist on their own, where they're in the back line casting something that is crucial to how the team operates. And maybe for those of us who are looking for more of the strategy RPG element from the game, since the tanks are mostly brawler DPS archetypes nowadays, supports are the ones that are going to do the most for the team. And while they didn't stick with this first one, it's a very decision-making, teamwork-based cast ability, which in short I'll describe as casting like Fortify on a teammate while giving yourself extra resource. They say in the post it would always be the best on a tank, but from the top level strategies we've seen, I think that would also be hilariously broken on Reaper. And I've got so much more to say about the new archetypes of team comps and how heroes are interacting differently in 5v5. The truth is, Overwatch community, we don't understand Overwatch 2 nearly as well as we think we do, which is an exciting thing. The meta, so far competitively has been really fun to watch, but I'll stop nerding out. Let's talk about the second iteration that they tried. This is called Purge and Nullify. The next two abilities, Purge and Nullify, were separate iterations that were both bound to damage Biotic Orb. Purge was heavily influenced by World of Warcraft's Shaman class, and it would remove buffs from enemies. Since this type of ability fits with Moira's personality, we started thinking about what buffs could be removed. We considered Purge canceling Ana's Nano Boost or Soldier 76's Sprint, but it wasn't super intuitive about what else should be removed. For example, Dragon Blade gives a small speed boost to Genji while active, and it was not clear if something like this would be removed by Purge. So because of that, Purge was archived, and the concept behind it led to the creation of Nullify. Nullify came to life when we started to rein in the scope of Purge. Nullify negated damage reduction, damage boosts, and movement speeds while active. For example, it would suppress the effects of Nano Boost for a few seconds. The team's goal with Nullify was to come to a consensus about what types of abilities should be repressed. One way the team attempted to add to Nullify was by enabling Moira to stop her orbs in place, creating areas of healing or nullification for teammates and enemies. Another iteration of Nullify dealt extra damage to Overhealth, so if Lucio used Sound Barrier in Nullify's range, his shields would be destroyed rapidly. This change felt tacked on and difficult to understand, so the Overhealth damage was eventually removed. However, it still wasn't super obvious what Nullify did while playing a match. You only noticed it for the most part if you had damage boosts, reduction, or speed on yourself when applied. Otherwise, you couldn't really feel the ability, especially compared to something extremely visceral like Sleep Dart. This thinking eventually led to the conception of the third ability, Weaken. Now, my comments on this section, I think, echo from my responses of the first one. Whether they're talking Purge or Nullify, a way I like to think of it is adding some complexity layer to the stack of abilities. And there isn't anything like this in the game yet, where if, say, the enemy team uses Speed Boost, Nano Boost, and Bubbles on one target of the team, you can withstand it or run away. Whereas this would give a minimizing effect to counteract it just with a cast, which could be very powerful if timed correctly, and would give Moira some power outside of just raw healing stats. So as a MOBA fan, I'm excited at the potential of this, but it's almost implied to me that that means some of her other abilities maybe are too strong if she also has some interaction counter spell, essentially, in her kit as well. Moving on to the third option, iteration number 3 is called Weaken. Weaken is the current iteration that the team is working on. The ability begins charging when reload is pressed once, causing Moira to build up energy in her hand. After Weaken is charged, Moira can fire a projectile that significantly lowers attack and healing output. She can choose when to fire this projectile or hold it at the cost of not being able to use her primary or secondary fire at the same time. We are considering something with a small projectile size, like on a Sleep Dart. When we have an ability that requires players to manage things like timing, ultimate tracking, or accuracy, we have more room to make something that is going to feel both impactful to use and fair to play against. Skill shots are broadly more counterable, which is another reason we can make them powerful in-game. We like Sleep Dart, even though we are removing a lot of crowd control from Overwatch 2 because it requires more to effectively use than non-skill shot abilities, because it's not innate, obviously. The team played around the idea of attaching a passive effect to her alternate fire, but found that we would have to lower the overall potency due to the damage beam's high uptime. Weaken won't have the same uptime, so we have more room to turn it into a playmaking, game-changing ability. It won't feel free to use to land, which this language, I mean, this is right up my alley. Free value. How many times have I said that over the last 6 years? I feel like they're speaking to me in this. And Moira will have to manage timing, positioning, and cast direction to successfully use Weaken. We aren't sure if this iteration will make it into the game because we are still testing it within the team, but it looks promising so far. Yeah, I gotta be honest, guys, like, I'm so frustrated with so many things with Overwatch 2, but at the same time, I can't help but be happy with so many of the things they're doing. They've watched a long list of things that I'm trying so hard to not just relentlessly complain about, and I'm given strength to do so when they say things like they're conscious of the concept of not having impact abilities that just feel free. Now, I might go the other way, where I might want a bit more free feeling abilities on the supports in Overwatch 2, because I think the baseline difficulty of 5v5 and asymmetric team fights is already hard enough. Like, they've gone like 10 steps forward in ensuring that you have to execute strats and set up your characters rather than just build a team comp that can't die like you could in Overwatch 1. Like, that's just always going to be the case. So I'm pretty happy to have supports have overpowered spells to cast, and not everyone agrees with me. I mean, there's some tank players that think Discord Orb is fundamentally overpowered because it stops you from running in relentlessly like an idiot, but I think this is where like the texture of the strategy of the game is housed in Overwatch 2. So what we're looking at here, the final iteration they're happy with is Weaken, which is a ability that isn't super situational, but has bigger applications the better you use it. So no matter what, if you cast it on anything, the target will do less damage and heal less. So there is some like it existing will just weaken the enemy team, kind of similar to casting a Discord orb without thinking about it, right? Put it on anything, and it's automatically weaker. Opposed to Discord Orb, which the vast majority of the time you just place on the tank, Weaken from Moira in this rework, you'll have a lot of interesting decisions to make. And since it's just in conception form, we don't really know the breakpoints of what to expect from it. But for example, if a tank dives your other support, do you cast it on them? Or if you want to focus the tank, should you cast it on the support healing them? And the fact that I'm not sure what that answer is in every situation and it kind of changes means that it is more dynamic of an idea than some of the other iterations they talked about where the answer was simple. I also think it means Moira is going to be way more survivable if she still keeps the 6-second fade. And I think in comparison, a concept like Immortality Field is way more healthy in Overwatch 2 than something like Moira Fade is, because it's much harder to protect an MO field when there's only one tank and most of them don't have shields anyway. Whereas Moira Fade and casting Weaken, I think might be super obnoxious, as is if they don't make any other changes. But that's what beta's for, that's what testing is for. There's one last section of the blog post where they talk about designing for a new era of Overwatch. They say ideas and iterations aren't always discarded when we don't initially use them. They're often resurfaced and used for future heroes. An example of this being Overwatch's first post-launch hero, Ana. Originally codenamed Alchemist, her first incarnation tossed potions at her teammates and wielded a healing grenade launcher. Well, that sounds familiar. That's Batiste's. Once we decided the Alchemist would be Ana, her potions became a biotic grenade, and her weapon transformed into a healing rifle to fit with her story. The Alchemist's original weapon would later become Batiste's biotic launcher. Of course. The ideas we're sharing with you are intended to offer more insight into our development process and a preview of the type of changes we may implement in the future for Moira. These iterations are completely independent of balance and solely focused on making Moira a more fun and exciting hero to play. We balance heroes after we can take a look at their complete kit all at once. Balance and design aren't mutually exclusive to one another, but rather they coexist at the same time with multiple factors that influence them both. The Moira iterations are one piece of what's going on with the hero design and balance team. There are many other changes being tested and considered across the entire roster. While we aren't quite sure what we will be changing for Moira or when those changes will happen, we are confident that we won't add something that isn't viable for our community and the game. Like all heroes within Overwatch, Moira is incredibly important to us. We want to do justice by her character and kit, and we're excited about what's in store for her. Okay, so I'm a little confused on whether we should expect this version of a rework to come by beta 2 or not. Remember, the announcement for their Save the Date event explaining the roadmap, we assume, for Overwatch 2 moving forward over the coming months and the next beta is set for June 16th, so mark your calendars for that. If there's a bit of a delay between now, then, and when the actual beta comes out, maybe they'll finalize this and put it into beta 2, but I'm still trying to gauge the cadence of their development here. We very much are on the content pipeline road with them, and I get the sense like things are just changing all the time, and they have no idea when anything will be done, realistically. So based on how they're saying, I think like it's the support's turn to get more of the focus, I hope, the next beta. And at least for myself, I certainly don't want the game to be overly a shooter. Overwatch 1's ability spam and RPG team comps, way too much. Playing it these past few weeks, I'm just reminded of how obnoxious that is. But Overwatch 2 has a good template to still have a lot of that in the support role. And I think that's where they're getting to with the like ability stacks. and more ways to interact with the hero abilities in the game. Guys, we do have more videos planned even prior to that announcement on June 16th. So if you want to make sure not to miss out on them, click the bell icon next to the subscribe button to get notified directly to your cell phone. I know there's a lot of doom and gloom surrounding Overwatch, but as a fan, I've got a lot of confidence in the competitive fundamentals they're building the game on. And I think it's only a matter of time that we fully get the finished product in our hands, that I'm pretty sure more players will fall in love with the game again like I am. But it'll be a bit of a mountain to climb, I assume. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for your Overwatch. We'll catch you guys next time.